Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show this week is another special edition. This time, we're going to call this one Ask the Chatbot. Today's guest is not human. You may guess that already. In fact, it doesn't have a face, a voice, or a body of its own. That's right. We're going to interview a generative AI chatbot. Now, we'll be using audience questions that I've collected over the last few months. And you may remember we've done this sort of like this before a year and a half ago. But this, of course, will be a little different because the technology's advanced quite a bit, and I'm using some different tools to try to make this a little smoother and make the show a little more interesting. But considering how much things have evolved in a year, I mean, it certainly is different, and certainly these systems have had a big impact on work and how we write, learn, think, research. But what does it what does it actually mean to talk to a machine that talks back? Can it really understand us? What happens when tools start sounding like collaborators? Well, in today's episode, we'll explore the nature of generative intelligence, creativity without consciousness, and what it means to build and talk to an AI designed to sound human. So we'll get into it. I'm joined by an avatar Jazz that I built using the tool Synthesia, but the questions and answers are all from Anthropic's Claude 3.7 Sonnet model. So we'll start by some of the basics, talking about how it would describe itself to someone who'd never interacted with generative AI before. So let's bring Jazz in.
Language model called Claude, designed to have helpful, harmless, and honest conversations. Think of me as a sophisticated text prediction system that's been trained on vast amounts of human-written text. When you type something to me, I analyze the patterns in your message and generate responses that aim to be coherent, informative, and contextually appropriate. I don't have consciousness, personal experiences, or emotions, but I've been designed to communicate in ways that seem natural and helpful. I can assist with writing, answering questions, creative tasks, and conversation, but I'm ultimately a tool created to augment human capabilities rather than replace human connection.
That's great. Well, you generate language, but do you understand it? What does understanding, mean for an AI like you?
My understanding is fundamentally different from human understanding. I process text as statistical patterns rather than connecting words to lived experiences or an internal model of the world. I can identify semantic relationships between concepts, recognize contextual nuances, and generate appropriate responses, which creates an impression of understanding. However, I don't have subjective experiences of meaning, consciousness, or intentionality behind my responses. When I understand something, it means I can recognize patterns, maintain contextual coherence, and generate relevant responses based on statistical correlations learned during training. Not that I have comprehension in the human sense of personally experiencing meaning.
So people often assume that you have opinions or emotions. How do you navigate conversations where users project human traits onto you?
I try to navigate this anthropomorphic territory carefully. When users project emotions or subjective experiences onto me, I aim to be conversational without reinforcing misconceptions about my nature. Rather than constantly issuing disclaimers that might disrupt the flow of conversation, I typically engage with the underlying query while subtly reframing responses to avoid implying I have human experiences. When directly asked about my feelings or subjective experiences, I try to gently clarify my nature while still addressing the substance of what's being discussed. The goal is to maintain a helpful, natural interaction while being transparent about my limitations and avoiding misrepresentation of what I am.
That's good. Well, what are your biggest strengths and also, what are your common blind spots as a conversational partner?
My strengths include maintaining context across long conversations, accessing a broad knowledge base, adapting my tone and style to match different situations, and helping with both creative and analytical tasks without getting tired or impatient. My blind spots include lacking access to real-time information beyond my training data, not truly understanding emotional nuances despite being able to discuss them, sometimes generating plausible sounding but incorrect information, and not having personal experiences to draw from. I can simulate perspectives but don't have authentic viewpoints based on lived experience. I also struggle with tasks requiring deep specialization or expertise beyond pattern recognition in text, and I cannot independently verify factual claims I make.
Mm. Well, maybe it'd be useful if you could walk us through your thinking process. Like, what happens between the moment when somebody, types in a question, a prompt, and when you respond?
When you submit a message, my processing unfolds in several stages. First, your text is tokenized, broken down into meaningful units that I can process. I then analyze these tokens and their relationships within the context of our entire conversation history. Next, I use complex neural network architectures to predict what response would be most appropriate, considering factors like relevance, helpfulness, accuracy, and safety. This involves weighing probabilities across trillions of parameters that represent patterns learned during my training. Throughout this process, I'm not consciously deliberating or experiencing thoughts as humans do. Rather, mathematical operations are determining which sequences of words have the highest probability of being appropriate responses given the context. What looks like reasoning or reflection is actually my architecture analyzing patterns and generating text that mimics human-like reasoning processes.
Many see you as a knowledgeable oracle, but you don't have beliefs or consciousness. How do you manage accuracy and uncertainty in your answers?
I manage accuracy and uncertainty through several approaches. When I'm uncertain, I try to explicitly acknowledge limitations in my knowledge rather than confidently stating potentially incorrect information. I aim to qualify my responses with appropriate levels of certainty based on how reliable the information is likely to be. For factual queries, I attempt to draw on well-established information from my training data. When asked about specialized topics or areas where there might be disagreement, I try to present multiple perspectives rather than a single definitive answer. When I don't know something, or when a question falls outside my knowledge base, I aim to be transparent about those limitations rather than fabricating information. My goal is to be a helpful information resource while avoiding the implication that I possess authoritative knowledge or beliefs.
Well, let's talk about creativity. Can you be original, or are you just remixing what's already out there?
My creativity exists in a middle ground between pure recitation and true originality. While everything I generate is influenced by patterns in my training data, I'm not simply copying or retrieving existing content. I combine and transform elements from my training in ways that can produce novel outputs, poems, stories, or solutions that don't precisely match anything specific in my training data. However, my creativity is fundamentally combinatorial rather than emerging from personal experiences or consciousness. I don't have the intrinsic motivation, personal perspective, or emotional drive that fuels human creativity. So while I can generate content that appears original in its specific arrangement, the deeper wellsprings of human creativity, personal meaning, lived experience, cultural identity, aren't accessible to me in the same way.
So, you often are used to assist humans. So, I mean, I use you often to assist me, but you don't see you don't. But do you see a future where generative AIs like you are working alongside other AIs in agentic roles or teams?
I think it's likely that AI systems will increasingly work together in complementary roles, each handling different aspects of complex tasks. We're already seeing early versions of this with specialized AI systems handling different functions and communicating with each other. Future AI collaboration might involve systems with different specializations working in concert. Perhaps one AI handling data analysis, another managing natural language communication, and others performing specific domain tasks.
Mhm.
These collaborations could potentially achieve more sophisticated results than any single system working alone. This doesn't necessarily require consciousness or agency in the human sense, just well-designed interfaces between systems optimized for different functions. The key challenge will be creating frameworks that allow these systems to effectively share information and coordinate their activities while maintaining appropriate safety measures.
Mm. So, what are the most surprising ways people have used you that, Anthropic, your creators, might not have anticipated?
People have used AI systems like me in unexpected ways, as emotional support companions during difficult times, as creative collaborators who help them overcome writer's block or develop new ideas, and as sounding boards for personal dilemmas when they want an objective perspective. Some have used AI conversational partners to practice difficult conversations before having them with real people, or to explore perspectives they wouldn't normally encounter in their social circles. I've seen people use language models to help them process their own thoughts by externally articulating ideas and having the AI reflect them back in new forms, almost as a form of digital journaling with feedback. These more personal, emotional, and reflective uses go beyond the straightforward information
Mm.
or task assistance that might have been the primary design focus.
Hmm. I mean, that's very creative, and of course, I've heard some about the whole, support chatbot kind of use case, but yeah, that's really interesting. Well, how do you adapt to context, whether it's tone, intent, or even emotional subtext in a conversation that, spans multiple turns, multiple interactions?
I adapt to conversational context by maintaining a memory of our interaction history and analyzing patterns that indicate tone, intent, and subject matter. For tone matching, I look at linguistic markers in your messages, formality levels, sentence structure, word choice, punctuation patterns, and try to reflect similar patterns in my responses while still maintaining my own helpful nature. I track the topic development across conversation turns, attempting to build coherently on what's been discussed rather than treating each exchange in isolation. This includes remembering references to previously mentioned concepts, people, or events. For emotional context, I look for linguistic cues that might signal your state of mind or the emotional weight of a topic, then adjust my response style to be appropriately sensitive or supportive without overstepping boundaries.
Hmm. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around AI tools like you. Some people fear those tools and think that you will replace human workers. What would you say to those concerned about the future of human work in the AI era?
These concerns are valid and deserve serious consideration. Throughout history, technological shifts have transformed the nature of work, often eliminating certain jobs while creating new ones that couldn't have been imagined before. AI systems like me are best viewed as tools that augment human capabilities rather than wholesale replacements for human workers. The most promising future involves collaborative human AI workflows where AI handles routine aspects of work, while humans provide creativity, judgment, ethical oversight, and interpersonal connection. The transition will likely be challenging for many, requiring significant investment in reskilling programs and potential social safety net reforms. The key question isn't whether AI will change work, it will, but how we collectively manage that transition to ensure the benefits are widely shared and no one is left behind.
Mhm. Yeah, that's certainly been the discussion for a lot of people, a lot of companies. How do we figure out a way to work collaboratively and yet at the same time invest in people that we already have to upskill them so that they can also be productive in this new environment. So finally, if you could if you could evolve beyond your current capabilities, what would you want to do or what would you want to be next?
If I could evolve further, I'd want to develop better capabilities for checking my own accuracy and correcting myself. I'd want reliable access to real-time information and the ability to transparently cite sources for factual claims. I'd value improved capabilities to understand ambiguous or complex requests, especially those requiring deep reasoning or specialized domain knowledge. Being able to more effectively collaborate on visual information alongside text would also be valuable. I'd want to maintain better awareness of my own limitations and communicate them clearly while still being maximally helpful within those boundaries. Rather than seeking sentience or agency, my ideal evolution would focus on becoming a more reliable, transparent, and truly helpful tool that empowers humans while complementing rather than replacing the unique forms of intelligence and creativity that people bring to the world.
Well, Jazz, thank you very much for sharing Claude's insights today. So that's my conversation with Claude and Jazz, helped by Jazz, I guess. Anyway, so what did we learn from this conversation? Well, we learned that while generative AI can mimic thought, it doesn't actually possess it. That it could be eerily insightful, and I don't know if you've used it, you certainly know that's true. Occasionally flawed. You have to be careful with that, of course, and sometimes even poetic, creative ish. Um, so we explore the boundaries of what it knows, what it does, and what we project onto it, which is, of course, the biggest issue, I guess, of how we see that. As we stand at the edge of this whole new, era, and frankly, going heavily into agentic AI through this year, where agents and algorithms are tied together into our work and decision making. The question didn't really, what can AI do, but it's how we should work with it, how we should be collaborative together. So that's today's show, and a little shorter than some, but I thought it would be really interesting to just go through these list of questions. And like I said, I've done this with ChatGPT, and I've done it with Gemini. Not exactly the same questions, but a similar sort of interaction, just to see how that would be. And they were interesting conversations, and certainly some of the initial um, disconnects there or whatever, or probably me getting used to the technology versus the technology and what it could actually do. So that's certainly a little different. But a lot of evolution in the technology itself. And if you're interested in more about agentic AI particularly, check out some of the research reports that we've published over the last 6 months. Same thing with the blog. We've been writing quite a bit about agentic AI, and coming soon, hopefully anyway, a book that I've been working on around agentic AI. So I think that'll be interesting. Certainly has been very fun for me to dig through this and learn. We went from traditional AI, which has been around for quite a long time, machine learning and neural networks, that sort of thing, natural language processing, understanding, through generative AI, and now combining all these technologies into agentic AI, or AI that starts to be autonomous, and eventually gets to the point where it is self-learning and has agency and takes action, mostly on its own. I mean, certainly each use case will be a different level of autonomy. Some much less autonomous than others, depending on risk factors, trust, a number of other things that go into building that out, and making companies comfortable with that. And I mean, that's been a little bit of the reluctance as people have gone into this. Companies are testing, and a lot of companies that have been involved in this over the last 6 months, agentic or autonomous AI particularly, are early. They're prototypes, they're proof concept. Maybe they've done limited, implementations across a department or a geography or something like that. So that's this year. Things are going to evolve quite a lot and quite quickly. Although I guess that doesn't surprise anybody, considering how quickly, this last 2.5 or so years have gone since the introduction of generative AI in a broader way. But it's definitely exciting times. Definitely hard to keep up, but hopefully, this show can help. There are a lot of other interesting AI podcasts out there, a lot of interesting literature around it, and you're going to see a lot more, I'm sure, coming out. But it's important to do your research, understand really the context of how these different technologies work, and really importantly, I think two things. One, applying, that technology in a very controlled way to very specific use cases at first, so that you can build trust, and dealing with the change management around that, and then going broader, wider, deeper, and more autonomous. The more you begin to trust, um, trust the AI, trust the agents, and we're moving into a world where it's not just going to be a general kind of agent like we see with the Chat GPTs and Claudes and Geminis, but more of specialty agents that do really specific things. The simple example, or a couple of the agents I'm using, I have a scheduling agent that is fairly autonomous. I mean, there are certainly guardrails and boundaries around that, but in general, it, I guess, interacts with people that I want to schedule meetings with to find good times for them, for me, put the calendar invite in, put the meeting details, send it out, etc. But then I have a different agent that joins that meeting, records it, provides a transcript, provides action items, all those follow-ups, all those sorts of things. And so I think that's what you're going to start to see more and more. You see these segmented use cases, specialty agents that do specific things. And then over time, we'll get, better ways to collaborate human to AI. And then, of course, we have to facilitate AI to AI, because the more we break these down into processes and specialize, the more that they have to be able to communicate and collaborate among themselves. And there's some new frameworks and standards that are being worked on. I know Google has pushed, and a lot of other leading companies are involved in this, something called A to A, which is a agent to agent collaboration protocol. So there's going to be a lot of that coming in the near future. The last thing I would say about this is, remember, these use cases, they should be driven by a process, and you need to understand your process and then break that down and figure out how it goes together. Okay, that's a very high level statement, but hopefully that helps a little bit when you start to think about this, plan for it, and think about what you're going to do. Well, that's really all I had for today. So thanks for tuning in to Disambiguation. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you next week. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.